Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Locked In Podcast, Season 3, Episode 10. Reaching double digits finally for Season 3 here. Excited to have my guest on here today. So let's hop right into who we're going to be having. It's going to be a former teammate of mine with a long list of accomplishments. Two-time Maryland State champ, Virginia State champ, never lost a postseason match in high school, NHSCA Junior All-American, Ironman medalist, Beast of the East finalist, and three-time medalist, Flow Nationals finalist, graduated high school ranked number 7 in the country at 152 pounds, wrestled collegiately at Liberty, Notre Dame College, and Lock Haven with a combined 27-11 record. Tyler Megonigal. What's up, TK? How are you doing, man?
Man.
Absolutely. Well, how do you feel hearing all your accomplishments from the past?
It's awesome. As a wrestler, you never look at it that way, right? Like, no matter who you wrestled with, all our teammates back at Lock, if they were a finalist, they wish they would have won it. If they qualified, should have been on the stand. So we have a tendency to look at, what we haven't done or where we came up short. So I think as I've gotten a couple years away from it, I've started to soak that in, and it's great to hear.
Yeah, that hit home when you said we look at kind of the things that we didn't accomplish as opposed to the great things that we have accomplished, right? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's a trend all too often. I mean, I heard it from Steve Garland, said it haunted him every day, his NCAA silver, and I always remember thinking that was a crazy thing, but it seems pretty common across the sport.
Absolutely. Well, guys, you can follow TK on IG here as displayed on the screen. It's hi_Tyler with 3 R's there. Make sure to go give him a follow here. But yeah, we have a lot to dig into today, brother. Let me take that off of here. We have a lot to dig in today. But before we dig into the deeper stuff, the deeper conversation here, at what age did you start wrestling and kind of what got you into wrestling?
Yeah, very common story as a lot of people. Young rambunctious kid, played a lot of sports, but wrestling and football were, kind of the first two. Football was the first love. I was a huge fan of the NFL at a young age. And then wrestling, that was kind of my dad's baby. And he was like, hey, you'll like this a lot. Like I said, I was bouncing off the walls, and I had 3 older sisters, so had no brothers to kind of, take it out on or get that energy out. And my dad put me in the sport at 5 years old and never looked back.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So you said you played football was kind of your main one growing up. What other sports did you play when you were growing up?
Gymnastics, swimming, football, as I mentioned, wrestling, and I think that'll be it for organized sports, but was a big skier, and then did a lot of pickup in my time as well.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of sports. I was baseball, football, wrestling. Same thing though. I was a big football guy, man. I love football. I really didn't truly understand that wrestling was going to be my next, the thing I was going to go at the next level at until about my junior year of high school. So
yeah, man, in pre NIL era, it was football's a money sport, and obviously it still, stands above as one of the biggest money sports. But, it was really kind of a future after wrestling wasn't a big thing when we were younger. The RTC wasn't as developed. So, I think those, same kind of things weighed on me. I was like, I wish I was a little bigger and I could, go D1 in football and have a chance to make the NFL. And any of my, heavyweight buddies who were really good at wrestling and played football, they pretty much all wanted to go, play football in college.
Yeah, absolutely. How tall are you? You're a little bit shorter too, right?
Yeah, I'm 5'7". So
I was. Go ahead.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'11", and I was a quarterback growing up, so it's kind of a tough way to make a living at 5'11" being quarterback.
Right. Yeah, you were good size at first, and then the sport outgrew you a little bit. Even for wrestling, I was recruited. I went 106 and 113 my 2 first years of high school, And by my junior year, I was being recruited as a 40 or 25 pounder. And, by the time I stepped on a college mat, I was a 57 pounder, hurting to make 57.
Right.
So even just being short, it always kind of like mess with my trajectory with sports.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. So in the beginning here in the intro, we heard your accomplishments, but talk about your high school career there and your years competing a little bit more in depth there and what that kind of looked like for you.
Yeah. I had a lot of success right when I started in local house league. I was undefeated and at 5 and, at 6, I was wrestling up and beating middle schoolers and was, undefeated in the Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland area and the local league. So started to branch out in elementary school. My dad was taking me to a lot of Pennsylvania clubs, New Jersey clubs, different coaches and all, the big national tournaments. So I wrestled at and placed and was a finalist and won, just about everything in youth and growing up between Tulsa, Reno, Dixie, York Nationals. The list goes on War at the Shore. I did all the big, dual stuff, McDonough duels, VAC, holiday duels, Wildwood, Ohio tournament champion. So it really was, I was kind of being from Northern Virginia. I was on the road all the time. My main club growing up was Predator down in Richmond. So it was about 2.5 hours from my house. I would go 3 days a week. My dad would pick me up from school. We'd go down to Richmond. I'd do a private with Mark Strickland. A lot of Predator guys that, some wrestling people would know. Jackson Turley, Joey Prada, Josh Weiland, Colin Girardi, same club that Joey Dance, Brandon Jeske came from, Cody Alala, a lot of good Virginia legends came from. So that was my room.
Yeah.
And obviously anytime there was clinics or coaches around, my dad was all over it and, we were in the car. So the other kind of big influence was Pitbull and Sonny Abe. I, did a few summers at the Solomons. There's Gus Solomon and Finn Solomon, who are Franklin regional guys. Finn actually wrestles at Pitt right now. But I used to stay with their family and train at the Pitbull Club in the summers. And so, was really decorated going to high school, was getting recruited by Blair, Wyoming Seminary, McDonough School, Georgetown Prep, a lot of Virginia, Maryland private schools. Ultimately decided to go to McDonough School and, had a great start to my career at McDonough. Was placed at Beast of the East. Trying to think, there, won states twice there. We won a team title. We won a team title over Good Counsel, which Kyle Snyder was on their team. And I was teammates at McDonough with Miles Martin. So I just really, the theme is, wrestling was everything from a young age through high school. And I had a lot of success at McDonough, again, placing in national tournaments, being nationally ranked, whether that's in season or off season, just, wrestling year round. I'd wrestle on the Virginia national team in the summer, go to, the cadet duels, junior duels, those kind of things. And then my junior year, I came back home to Madison, which was my hometown school in Virginia, my hometown public school. And then I won a state title there, was our second ever state champ. So, I had a really successful career. And I think to me, that success was never the state tournament or, a really good record, which I only lost a handful of matches all of high school. To me, it was all about how I did it. Beast of the East, Ironman, NHSCA, Flow, all those things you listed. So, looking back on it, it's there wasn't one that I didn't place in that I, missed out on that, so I'm really happy about that career. And that's kind of how it all went.
Yeah, absolutely. So I noticed that you were a 3-time state champ. So why did you not wrestle your senior year?
So a lot of people don't know this actually. And I mentioned the team title for McDonough. So I have 4 state rings. I never lost a postseason match, as you mentioned. So my freshman and sophomore year, I won individuals at McDonough. My junior year, I had an insane kind of ride. And, people who don't know just say I missed weight. It was a lot deeper than that. And it was a pretty crazy story, actually. So my only loss my junior year was the finals of East of the East to AC Headley, in a closely, contested match. He was the current number one in the country at the time. And the guy who ended up winning my state bracket, we go way back. He's a really good guy. And the other guy he wrestled in the finals was, an opponent I had earlier in the year that I had, tech pinned. So, I was pretty, always set out to be a 4-time state champ, was pretty locked in on that goal and expected to do it. Obviously my junior year as well. And at the regional tournament, it's insane. As a wrestler, I won't sit here and blame the scale. Like, that's actually absolute crazy talk. I think anybody who watches this podcast will be like, this guy's full of it. Like, there's, they'll either believe this story or they won't. But here it goes. It's the only time I ever missed weight, ever stepped on the scale and busted weight in my life. And it was a regional tournament. I got to the scale about 10 minutes before they called us for weigh-ins. I had a Gatorade bottle, plastic, Dick's sporting bottle. That's a great one for you right there. Get that shot right there, a Dick's sporting bottle. But anyway, had one of those squirt bottles with Gatorade in it. I got on the scale. I was 0.6 under. I stood on the scale holding the bottle with the Gatorade in it. Anybody who ever wrestled knows, this is bulletproof safe, right? Because it's the fluids I'm going to drink plus, in a plastic bottle, right? And I'm standing and I'm still 0.2 under holding it. Just a little bit of Gatorade. And so I crushed it. I sat right there in my boxers and waited for them to call us. I was the first one up in my weight class, step on the scale, 0.2 over. Now, mind you, this is a really old digital scale. This is as old of a digital scale as you've seen. It has the stand, and the digital numbers, and it only goes by 0.2. There's not even a 0.1, and there's no tenths beyond that. So it's going back and forth between flat weight and 0.2 over. And it lands on 0.2 over. And I step off the scale. I get back on the scale one more time. I let out all my air. Same exact thing's happening. Lands on 0.2 over. The guy holding the bracket goes, Megonigal? I'm like, yep. He goes, you're scratched. And it was like one of those movies where you're walking out of the locker room. And, it's not over yet. Just wait. And so I'm walking out of the locker room. Everything's great. There goes my dream. My coach is right outside the locker room. My coach, Paul Bajorlo, he was the ACC champ at UVA and was like pretty much my private coach my senior year. And I walked out and he's on the wall and he just starts talking to me. And I'm like, Coach, I missed weight. And he's like, what? I'm like, I missed weight. I couldn't even believe it myself. And he's like, well, how many times did you get on the scale? I was like, twice. And he's like, well, Virginia rules, you get 3 tries. And I'm like, Coach, I don't think it matters. Like, I was over twice. And he's like, no, you're getting back on the scale. He walks me back in the locker room, straight to the front of the line. Is like, hey, my wrestler only got 2 attempts to make the weight. And they're like, okay, get back on the scale. Get back on the scale, flat weight. They go, Megonigal, you're good. From the back of the locker room, the coach of the school of the kid who ended up winning the state championship, who was also in my region, who, I actually had wrestled for back in the day at NHSCA. I'm a competitor. So I'm like, only have good things to say about, this guy. And I wanted to wrestle, we were childhood friends. I was the heavy favorite, but, we grew up together in the same club. We should have got our chance to wrestle in the state finals and the region finals that tournament. But his coach was the one who came up with the rule book and said, this wrestler actually left the weigh-in area, came back, and it was a legal weigh-in. And you can't do that. VHSL rules, you can't do that because you could go cut weight or, put on plastics or whatever. So there was like a 40-minute postponement to the regional tournament. They were arguing it. They had all the refs, the head ref, my coaches, the Westfield coaches. And then, I got disqualified. So I did not wrestle my junior year in the state tournament. And my only loss was the finals of Beast. But then my senior year, then I, won it in dominant fashion.
Okay. That's insane, man. That's a heck of a story there.
It's a story. It's a heck of a story. So
yeah, that sucks. That's insane. But yeah, I mean, I kind of, so I don't have a similar story. I didn't get to wrestle my senior year. Actually, I wrestled one tournament and blew my knee out, so I didn't get a chance of showing that I was the best again in the state, following my state championship my junior year, and so that still kind of hurts to this day, and I'm sure that kind of hurts to this day for you as well.
Well, and I remember that, and I remember when you committed to Lock Haven, we were all really excited, because how great of a high school career you had, and you being ranked and you being successful, and your success out of Flow Nationals, like all those same things. The team at Lock Haven was really excited for you, and I remember you had shared that with me because you were recovering from that surgery. And you shared that kind of same thing. You're one of the top guys in the nation, but can't defend your state title, and
yeah,
how many people too, right? In all different years of wrestling, and throughout high school or throughout college, you just have so many seasons on ice.
Yeah, it sucks, man, but it is what it is. I mean, injuries is obviously a part of the game, and can't really control that to a certain extent, right? So,
right,
it sucks. But so after all your success in high school, what were kind of your college choices? I'm sure you had quite a bit of choices coming out of high school, but what was kind of your top 3, top 5 schools there?
Yeah, my top 5 was NC State, Virginia Tech, Maryland, Missouri, and Michigan State. Those would be my top 5. I would say, really it came down to probably the top 3 with Tech, NC State, Maryland. And then I originally committed to Maryland. I did, I tore my ACL, and for anybody watching, anybody who knows me, everybody, talked about it at some point. I got in a little bit of trouble too. So I found myself taking kind of whatever the best offer was, because I felt like I earned the right, to wrestle on a scholarship with all I had accomplished and all the work I had put in, my family had put in. So there was a little bit of a comeback story, and that's even how I ended up at Lock Haven. So originally I committed to University of Maryland. There was a popular gray shirt plan that Ryan Deal and Josh Lopez, who are 2 very decorated wrestlers ahead of me that went to Maryland, did. And Ryan Deal was a few-time NCAA qualifier. He was a Pennsylvania state champ, West Virginia state champ, Super 32 champ. So I was kind of following in his footsteps. And it was essentially kind of like the gray shirt that the guys up at Cornell do at the Finger Lakes Academy, where my college clock doesn't start, but I'm wrestling in college opens. I'm in a college room, and I'm taking some credits towards my degree, but I'm not a full-time student. My clock doesn't start. And, my dad was looking at post-grad options. He considered sending me to Semmer player for a post-grad, but you can only wrestle in so much. And I was already so successful. It's like there wasn't that much around for me on the high school scene. So I did the gray shirt to Liberty because I graduated high school at 17. And, honestly, my dad still didn't want me to go to Maryland. So he still wanted me to consider Iowa, who Iowa also recruited me, but I never really considered them just because, I kind of wanted to be the star. I kind of wanted to stand out a little more. And NC State was just on the come up then. Virginia Tech was pretty good, but that was always one of my top schools. And then, that was a big reason why I originally committed to Maryland. I wanted to be, the guy. I wanted to be the star wrestler. So I think going back, I would have considered, maybe Iowa or another program that was, even like NC State. One of the reasons I didn't go to NC State was because they had a lot of guys coming around my weight, one of them being Hidley. And, I always regretted that. I'm like, I should have probably focused on where I can get the best instead of where I can, be better than everybody else when I walk in.
For sure.
Yeah. So I did the gray shirt route at Liberty. I wrestled in a few tournaments. And then I tore my ACL, and I withdrew from, the part-time thing. And during that, I decommitted from Maryland. I reopened my process, and it became between Rutgers and Notre Dame College. Notre Dame was just bringing all the money, and I was at the most uncertain part of my career, being in a full leg cast when I took my visit. So I took that and quickly made the jump to Lock Haven. But it's another thing. Anybody who knows, there was kind of an unprecedented experience at Notre Dame. I had one of my roommates who was undiagnosed bipolar and schizophrenic. He lost it, and and there was a lot of just kind of crazy things that happened in light of that. So a lot of my friends ended up transferring out, and I was one of them. I left after only a semester there. I always knew I wanted to go Division I, but there was some politics too with they wanted to pull my red shirt. My dad wanted me to take a year to recover from the ACL. So we were already kind of like looking in that direction. And then, once that happened, and again, I think it's important to talk about these things. I could just brush it over and say, hey, I transferred, but, mental health is such an important thing. And being a kid, alone at college, I went through an unprecedented situation. So I think when I talk about transferring to Lock Haven, it was never even supposed to be that fast, and it wasn't supposed to be Lock Haven. It was supposed to be, win a national title at Notre Dame, transfer to Okie State, or, one of these other big schools that I had my eyes on that didn't recruit me. Like Okie State never recruited me. So I really wanted to go there, or somewhere like that, or reconsidering a school I had talked to. But then when I transferred, it was West Virginia, Edinburgh, or Lock Haven. And, Lock Haven just made the most sense for me.
Okay. Yeah. So what we'll do is I'll take a sponsor break here for you so you can take a little break from talking here, and then we'll dig into actually what happened, committing to Lock Haven and going from there. So hop into the sponsor today's episode quick here. So today's episode is brought to you by LifeVantage. Oxidative stress. It's in everybody's body on this planet. It is the leading cause of aging and disease. What if we could reduce that by 40% in just 30 days? We can. With one NRF2 activator taken daily, your oxidative stress levels will be significantly lowered while supporting the body's natural ability to repair and rejuvenate its own cells. Activate healthy aging today with one little yellow pill. If you'd like to learn more or purchase NRF2, reach out to me directly on IG at SER_Sage, or visit the link tree in my bio to check out the LifeVantage website for yourself. Thank you, LifeVantage, for sponsoring today's episode. All right, so moving on here, TK, I'll send you some info on some LifeVantage products as well for you. I'll send a hat your way for the podcast as well for being on here. So I appreciate you and appreciate your time. So I'll send you some info on that with the hat. So
likewise, man, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So leaving Notre Dame, you kind of just talked about it. You had a couple options. Why was Lock Haven the one that you ultimately decided? I know you said it was kind of money situation. They were offering the most for you. Is that really strictly the main reason why you ended up going there?
Yeah, I think, finances was a big part of it. The financial assistance mixed with just kind of already the cost of tuition being low. It really was a near free choice. But I think it to me, it was important to wrestle for a program that, was known for wrestling. That wasn't just kind of, there were several big schools, that I considered that, weren't very good at wrestling. And I think to me, it just became important to be somewhere where I could, see myself being in a winning culture and on a winning team. And Lock Haven was really on the ride. Literally, our slogan was on the ride, or the rise. Right. So you had Chance, who kind of carried that train, and then all those guys who came around at that same time and really panned out. A lot of local PA guys like Corey Hazel and DJ Feldman and Kyle Shoup. So they had a good winning culture. Ron Perry had just made his run. So it was kind of, they stood out. I mean, Edinburgh, I was really close committing to Edinburgh, but there was some, chatter about Flynn leaving. And so there was, some uncertainty around that decision. And then, West Virginia, which was always on the radar, when before Flynn got there, and then once he was there, and I actually even looked at transferring from Lock Haven and considered, was in the portal and considered West Virginia once Flynn was there as well.
Okay. Yeah. So dig into that a little bit at Lock Haven. So I know you didn't compete as much as you kind of would have liked there at Lock Haven. We'll dig into your record and about that a little bit more here. But what was kind of the reason that you didn't compete more at Lock Haven?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it for so long, when I competed, it was my best foot forward. I mean, sure, I did all the, show up, freestyle, 4-weight classes above, and just scrap. I did that, of course.
Right.
But as far as, like the big national tournaments and, the things that you're targeting as, the accomplishments you want, it's everything from your training to your diet to, your sleep, your recovery. So like everything had to be right. And there was tournaments that, I was registered for Journeyman and had a really loaded bracket full of tough guys. And as I got closer, my dad kind of was a big influence on my career. And if he didn't think I was ready, he's like, let's refocus, let's put our focus on the next one. And that could be a million things. It could be injury, it could be weight, it could be, just kind of anything going on, maybe development or, I think once I kind of like leading with that, once I tore my ACL, and once I transferred to Lock Haven, I didn't have a rush. I was ineligible. I knew I was going to be ineligible my first year at Lock Haven. So, I had no rush to be like, hey, I need to start wrestling in opens. I need to, and so I was still kind of coming back. When I transferred to Lock Haven, I was I was 9 months post-op. And so then like I was about a year post-op by the time, they kind of started wanting me to compete, Scott and Nate. And, I was just kind of resistant to that because I didn't want to have any setbacks with my injuries. And I didn't want to go and wrestle, not up to my fullest or not trust myself to go knee over toe in situations or things like that. So I held out a little bit at first, and then I was ineligible my first year there. So to me, because of everything I accomplished in my career from a young age, like, I was wrestling in huge arenas, in front of huge crowds, at a young age. So as far as like just wrestling in college opens, obviously it's a big part of development, but to me, I was like, well, let me select a few and maybe wrestle 2 or 3 times this year. And, the coaches wanted me to wrestle every weekend. And, as we had a pretty intense cardio regimen at Lock Haven, and we didn't do a lot of focus training. We didn't do a lot of, we didn't do any kind of differential training based on your injuries or past injuries. So it's like, it's kind of put up or shut up. Like you're not gonna sit out, or you're not gonna, really, there's no really room to complain about it. Like you're trying to get in good graces with your coaches. You're trying to be the guy. You're trying to be the leader. So I just did all those workouts, and a lot of them were detrimental. It's, plate carries and these things up mountains, and lots of just like wear and tear on my knees, which were already bad. So I knew they were bad. I knew it wasn't helping me, but again, there's really nothing you can do. So I mean, I think like once I got into at Lock Haven and we were training that much and doing that much, and I was nursing all these other injuries because you're compensating coming back from a major injury like the ACL. Now all these other things are injured. And I always had this mindset of like, hey, we compete at 100%. If we're not 100%, we train, we develop, we get back to 100%. And I had even more of a reason to think that way because I'm ineligible, So me and the staff at Lock Haven did not see eye to eye at all on that. We completely clashed on it. So I trained through those injuries. And then when I did wrestle, I mean, I wrestled at 50%, and, I pretty much would always end up injury defaulting if I didn't win it. Like once I was out of the winner's bracket, I'm like, I'm super injured. So, I'll default to 4th or 5th, depending on where I am in the bracket, or out, and and just call it a day, so that kind of cycle I got caught in a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate 100% to what you're saying because as you know, my first year at Lock Haven during the whole COVID year and everything, I retore the little bit of meniscus I had left. So they took out kind of what was remaining there. Now I have about 20% of it left, and I wasn't even supposed to run. Doctor's orders went out to Vail, Colorado, where they did Tom Brady, Christian McCaffrey, all their surgeries, right? So it's top of the line. They know what they're talking about. Yeah, wasn't supposed to run, and came back in, kind of told the coaches that a little bit, and next thing you know, I'm running the next day, and I'm like, all right, I'm a competitor. I'm taking top 3 in the sprints, whatever we're doing. I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. It's detrimental, and at the end of the day, I had to create a schedule for myself going into our training, our athletic training office, and I would do PT literally for an hour before one of our practices. And I would do that PT and I'd be feeling sore after it. And I'd go right in and wrestle after that. I mean, that's not really how you want to do things, right?
Exactly. And I remember that, Sage. I remember that all too well. And it's, as it wasn't just us. It was all of our teammates in one facet or another, and one injury or another at one time or another in their career. And there's definitely some envy of the programs that were doing it better, doing it right. Lock Haven, we're already behind with kind of just our facilities and the amount of trainers, and we're kind of fighting over ice packs, like those kind of things already. So, it definitely didn't help. I think there was a certain culture and mentality that, I felt like it was all about being in the best shape possible. And then, a lot got overlooked in that pursuit, and development, rehab, those kind of things, and like you're talking about, just what you went through as far as you have the highest specialists in the world, telling you here's your plan, here's your regimen, and then you bring it back to your Division I wrestling program, and they ball it up and throw it out, and are like, hey, you're a tough kid, you can run, come on, right. You got it. And you're like, oh yeah, I mean, I am a tough kid, and I guess I can do this. And it's like, but is it best for me and my career? And it panned out for a lot of guys to not be. And even, I think even a lot of guys that have success in that program, it's kind of despite all that. It's not really like, they jumped levels at Lock Haven. They're all a lot of talented wrestlers walk in that door, and I think. Some guys, have better luck than others, and that's not taking anything away. You have to earn it, and and I think some guys have better luck with their health, but ultimately too, some guys just figure it out and prevail in that situation, and some guys, like I know for me, I always came from I felt like Rocky. I had coaches, parents, I had everybody in my corner saying, you're the man, you're the best, like you're going to be a world champ, nobody can touch you. And then I got to Lock Haven, and it was like kind of looking for reasons to show your flaws and be like, oh, are you as tough as you think you are? Like, and that didn't help me personally with my style of wrestling and my psychology.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I completely relate to that too. I mean, I was kind of, the man after my junior year, and I had different styles of coaching. They were kind of like, hey, I'd have one really tough guy over here. He's hard on me, but he's hard on me in the right times, right? There's a different time to be hard on somebody than there is to be, hey, I need to be supportive to this guy, right? So I had that kind of mixture of coaching, and then when I got there and I went through that process, same thing. I didn't even really wrestle a college season match because we didn't have that first season. And, I wrestled a couple off-season tournaments in freestyle, and that was really all I got to do before I got to the point where, I had to step away from wrestling because of my knee. And even when I went in and had the conversation with the coaches, it's them trying to convince me, hey, we just got to do this. We got to train a little bit harder. And I'm like, train a little bit harder. Like I can't train any harder than what I'm doing right now, not with my body. And as you kind of said, I was wrestling at that 50-60% of my actual ability because strictly of my body and how I was feeling. And at the end of the day, I told them, hey, this is a Division I program, Division I, any sport. I don't care what sport it is. If you're competing at 50-60%, Are you going to be able to, win a national title or even succeed at the level you want to? No. And they kind of are like, yeah, I mean, we kind of get it. And that was it. And the next week I was gone, it was that type of deal.
Yep. And it's something that, like, I was just talking with my buddy Dylan Wisman, who was a MAC champ at Missouri and a two-time qualifier at Missouri. And we were just talking about, because he went through some of the same things. I mean, he did express that Coach Smith in Missouri, they were a lot better at kind of, they had a good weight program. They did a really good job of peaking. They didn't do live in the summer. They really shut down the 2-a-days in season and focused on rehab and development and, those kind of things. So it seemed like they did a lot right that we didn't really have in a bottle at Lock Haven. But, one of the things is, like you said, it's part of the sport, is injuries. He had 8 surgeries. That was, through the full time through the sport, but I think he had 3 or 4 in college. And we talked about, you go into, whatever, the training room, you're nursing an injury, you get this much better from the treatment. You do a bunch of different treatment. You take, 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, and then you get into practice and you're just good enough to practice, and you sell out. Like all Division I wrestlers, all you know how to do is sell out and work your hardest. So you sell out in every aspect of it. And then, you're lower than where you started. And then the next morning you do, maybe you have a morning workout. So you could even take steps back there. But regardless, you're back in the training room, just getting back up enough to where you can just get into practice and get through it. And then you're setting yourself back. And, in Lock Haven's culture, it's like, you sit out for a workout, if you're banged out, you're banged up or you're injured and you're out, for any reason, you're catching fades from the coaches. It's like, oh, you're soft, or, oh, will you, how will your season go if you're already sitting out? Things that, planning things that just like shouldn't be planted. So, I think that was going back to what you were saying about, just the training program. And I think a lot of it was, it's like taking a really nice muscle car and just like drag racing it and just like, crushing down on the brake, while you're at full speed and, Tokyo drifting. It's like, yeah, we can sell out, but if you're putting huge implications on, you're wrestling with your buddy, you're the same weight, you guys are going to be competing for a spot come fall, it's the middle of summer, and you have your coaches standing over you acting like you're wrestling for the spot, and, men, give it your all right here and sell out. And you do that every day over and over again. And there's never like, hey, let's have a recovery day, or, let's do these things. It's like, you're destroying yourself. Yeah, you're revving it to your highest level when you don't really need to. And you're not better for it.
Exactly. And I mean, like, go ahead.
I was just gonna say too, like, one thing I remember, you had, several offers, and you had originally committed to ODU, which was a program I had actually considered too. They probably should have been in my top 5 over Michigan State. And then kind of unprecedented, they dropped their program, and now you have to look at all those other schools that offered you. They've moved on at this point. They've filled those holes. They've offered that money elsewhere. You were their number one. They've had to move on, and they've got commitments, and so it just completely complicates your process. And like I said, when we got excited about you came, it's like, hey, you landed in our lap. I think the guys on the team knew all too well that there's a chance you might hate it very soon, but that was just kind of the lay of the land.
Yeah. And it's like, going back to what you were saying, I was excited to go to ODU. I was a money focus. I wasn't going to get financial help from my parents. It was me, and so I made that decision because essentially, I can say it now because they're not a program, but I was getting paid to go there, right, to ODU. Yeah. And so who wouldn't do that, as especially an 18-year-old kid coming out of high school? And obviously, when they dropped their program, I had Cleveland State actually reached out to me first, which is Scott Moore's brother, Josh, over there. And they actually talked to Scott, talked to Ronnie. Next thing you know, they're like, yeah, we got 99% lock on the Cerventa kid up here in Michigan. And then they called me the next day and kind of stole me from them, which is kind of a funny story.
Yeah, I do remember now. And rest in peace.
Man,
state. Hopefully somebody steps in and helps save that program.
Yeah, that sucks that they dropped their program too. I mean, at this point, if I was wrestling, I think I would have been a fifth year senior right now anyway. So I guess it wouldn't have mattered too much if I still admitted there. But yeah, I mean, I still feel the repercussions of all the years. I've had 6 surgeries, 5 knee surgeries and elbow surgery, and I actually just went to this place over by me and did some cold plunge, some sauna, red light therapy, some the Normatec boots and the PEMF stimulator. Like, I still have to do that stuff because my body still feels it, man.
Same exact thing, man. I'm doing the red light therapy, the sauna, cold plunge. I mean, my back pain flares up, which I never had surgery on my back. My back pain is like the worst and flares up so often. So it's like my thumbs don't really track right. Of course, the ACL, I ended up having meniscus and total of 3 ligament repairs. So, same thing, whether it's the surgeries or even the ones that didn't go under the knife, it's like you feel it all. My favorite one is
I fractured my lower back. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say my favorite one is the acid that like so many wrestlers seem to have from cutting weight and having that empty stomach, just like the stomach acids, just like crushing your esophagus. Now, so many of us have like acid reflux and those kind of things too.
Yeah. I fractured my lower back last year, and and I'm sure that's from wrestling. I did it kind of when I was lifting. I felt it, but I'm sure it's from wrestling initially anyway,
Yeah, exactly. You wore it down.
Yeah. But so going in collegiately, you were 27-11 in your career. They're actually competing. Came out of high school ranked number 7 with a long list of accomplishments. So we kind of touched on it a little bit there, and mainly a lot of the injuries and the culture and all that. But why do you believe the ultimate reason, if you had to break it down into one reason, was the quote unquote lack of success that most people probably thought you were going to have more success at?
My mind. 100%. I think that's what it comes down to. It's like you can attribute kind of where I lost that fire or that edge or that chip to a lot of things in a lot of different areas, and it all comes back to, where did that put me? It put me in a place mentally where I just didn't have it. I think that's the most simple way. Even like I graduated with over a year of eligibility. I had the next semester, I graduated in the winter. I had the next semester, and then I had another year, and then I could have potentially even got a medical. So, but with the COVID years and the transfer and the gray shirt, it's like it already felt like it was time. And, the main thing was my last year. I had already kind of was dragging my feet on graduating, and I was going to get a minor, and I was just kind of like doing the whole school thing so that I could, continue wrestling. And, the last year I was like, this is going to be, and that was your second year when we were, back on campus, and when you had to medically retire. And, I was like, it was the same semester that you and I actually left, which is crazy to think about because it was, this is kind of my Hail Mary here. I'm either going to, start this season on fire, and it's going to be like no brainer that I'm going to keep going, or I'm going to graduate. I'm going to, try to make a living. At that time, like my now wife and I were getting pretty serious. So I started just seeing things beyond the mat. But I was like, I put my best foot forward. I went back down from 65 to 57. I ate super well. I did the best I ever did in the cardios. I honestly had the most durability in the sense that just like mentally, I just pretty much just pushed through it and didn't even think about it. But then, like I had a major setback with my knee and my shoulder right before Clarion. And it was like one of the times where like right when you were going through it and we had talked about it a little bit, and it was the same thing. I was so bothered because, I knew all it took was like, if I sat on the sideline for one practice, that's all it would take to write me off at this point, and because I didn't really talk about it, but once I did, so I was ineligible my first year. My second year was the COVID year when everything got canceled. Your freshman year, the season got canceled. I already wasn't in a great place with mainly Nate Carr. So I went in the transfer portal and I was looking at Gardner-Webb, Ohio, West Virginia, and Ryder. And then, the world as we knew it paused. So, when COVID happened, all that happened, I ended up moving back to Lock Haven just because like, look, I don't want to get my parents sick. I don't want to get my grandparents sick. Like, I'm going to just go live with the boys. And so I moved back to Lock Haven, and, obviously it was a no-brainer that, wrestling was such a big part of my life. It was like transferring was on hold. And I even got like Clarion started recruiting me kind of at the end there at the summer. And I even thought about it, but it's like right around the time I met my wife, and she's from Lock Haven area, went to Penn State. So I was like, I had a kind of a reason to stay at that point. And so I, came back to the coaches, were like, hey, and it felt like a fresh start. Like when I said, hey, I want to come back to the team, they were like, we'd love for you to come back to the team. We believe that, you have all the skills to be an All-American, and so it was great. And our relationship was honestly the best it ever was for a short period of time. And I think, everything that happened over the facility, I don't think they really took care of us. And, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt, and they just mismanaged a lot again. And our relationship soared in that time. So, when I came back for my senior year, I was kind of like an untouchable. Like, they were ready to move on from me. Our relationship was so bad, but I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was living a great lifestyle. And, I was one of the better guys in the room. One of the toughest guys in the room. And it's just like, I can just scrap. So at the end of the day, it was like, they weren't going to touch me or do anything, but they had no plans for me. And then we brought in a transfer at my weight, and Ben, who, we were all teammates with, and he was injured the entire preseason, and they were, he was already like the locked in starter. So, we never got to wrestle. We never got to wrestle off. We never got to compete for the spot. So, they made it very clear that they didn't want me around. And I heard that loud and clear. So for me, it was like, I'm either going to come into these, first few opens and just set it on fire, or, I'm probably ready to move on. And, I didn't have the fire, and it came down to the mindset. And I didn't, the day of, I didn't really want to be there, and I was just kind of over it. I was over cutting the weight. I was over waiting in line and, for the bathroom after weigh-ins. I was over the warm-up. I was over just like the whole thing. And, going back to like been doing it since I was 5 years old and at a really high level. And so it is kind of like I hit my burnout, but I love the sport so much, and I always loved the sport so much, that it wasn't a true burnout. It was like, if I had, a coaching staff that believed in me, it was like, hey man, your best days are still ahead of you. You still have, one more season, plus maybe a medical, plus the rest of this year, like it would have changed everything. But I was doing it like, almost against my program and against my coaches at this point, so I just was like, hey, I'm ready to move on, and I think, but attributing to like what wasn't, what could have been, or any of that stuff, it's like, I just blame it on myself and my mindset. And there's a million things that kind of led to it,
Yeah, absolutely. So leaving college, you got a sports administration degree. What did you think you were going to end up doing, and talk a little bit about what you are currently doing?
Yeah, I mean, I chose for college. I never would have gone to college if it weren't for wrestling. I never cared about my academics in high school or prior. And that's another thing, even with my college choices, like Stanford tried to recruit me, Columbia, UVA, and I never considered these prestigious prestigious institutions that I never even like thought about, because I could care less really about my education at that time. And when I got to Lock Haven, I did sports admin because it was the easiest one, or at least that's what everybody said. And I ended up just like becoming really passionate just about learning in general. Showing I had more to me than just like a meat-headed wrestler, and kind of how I was always kind of, put in this bubble. So, I started to excel academically, even though it was in a pretty easy major. But, I always thought I would be a Division I wrestling coach. That was like no doubt for me. That's what I was going to do. I thought about fighting MMA, but it was like no doubt that's all I was going to do was wrestle. And that's all that was going to be, my life was going to be centered around. And then I think that experience put such a bad taste in my mouth. Like overall, the experience was awesome. The brothers I made, like you, the guys I wrestled with, the person it made me. I met my wife at Lock Haven. Like, it's like I wouldn't change anything, but I'm trying to backtrack to where I was.
You're good.
What was I speaking on? What was it?
Just kind of about what you're currently doing now after leaving what you thought it was going to be like and where you are.
Yeah. So it's like, so everything changed from there. And it's like, I started to think more about, the experience of Lock Haven put a bad taste in my mouth as far as just like wrestling. At this point, I wasn't the decorated guy that I was supposed to be. And I wasn't, this Division I coaching candidate, but I was an extremely attractive coaching candidate for just about every role in wrestling, which is, anything from Division II and Division III head coaching jobs to assistant jobs to, it was pretty much anything not Division I was a huge value. There's a lot of high schools, private schools that try to offer me head coaching jobs, operation jobs. Ultimately I had buddies that weren't wrestlers who were in tech sales, and, they were making really good money and a lot more than I was interviewing for. And I kind of got placed into a tech sales program that I felt very lucky, to get into to start my career. And so I started my career in sales and cybersecurity, selling to the federal government. And it's nothing that I thought I would ever do. Sales is like a common, if you have no specialty, it's a common, if you're good at sports and you're good with people, but it can be a pretty, it can be drastically different depending on what company you're working for. So, I stigmatized sales a little bit, but I got into tech sales and, ended up finding a good path there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're currently with a tech sales company then still?
So so now I do sales for a federal communications firm. So similar, same industry, pretty much just pivoted, went from selling technology and cybersecurity directly to the federal government to now I do sales for a company that supports the companies that sell to the federal government. So, your Lockheed Martin's, CACI, if you're familiar, Leidos, like any of those big government contractors that sell anything to the federal government, from, missiles to IT solutions to tankers, you name it, to military equipment. We support those kind of companies. We do all kinds of different tech for them. We do all kinds of communications for them and corporate identity stuff and strategy. Now I'm I'm on the industry side supporting clients who support our federal government.
Okay. Awesome. That's really cool. Really cool. So you kind of talked a little bit too, that you have your hand in USA Wrestling with a bunch of different people. You actually talked about how you guys had a hand in the Unstoppable documentary, the movie there that's came out about Anthony Robles. So what did you guys kind of have a hand in there, aid in with that movie there?
Yeah, absolutely. For the Anthony Robles movie, Unstoppable, that one was really cool. We got actually brought in long before they even announced, started doing any trailers or announced it. So we were one of the first people to find out, my vice president and I, because we were on a call with the executive director of USWF, US Wrestling Foundation. Unstoppable, we were brought in to do some marketing strategy. We were brought in to do some marketing strategy and advertising for the movie, as well as, which, a very similar campaign to what we do for US Wrestling Foundation, which is, aside from, initially when they were founded, doing their brand and doing their website and doing their kind of identity and marketing for the organization, one of the biggest projects that we did, or biggest campaigns we did, is called Let's Wrestle. And that was a national campaign. It helped grow the sport of wrestling 2 years in a row. And the growth, we saw record growth in the sport of wrestling at a high school level from a participation standpoint. And we did messaging and strategy and posters and a campaign, as well as some social media targeted at high school aged individuals that basically, played up the brand of wrestling. And, is the hashtag was Let's Wrestle. And, and it was it was kind of getting away from the traditional marketing of wrestling of, oh, it's tough and it's hard and you're going to cut weight. And it's like, yeah, it can be all those things, but it can also be so much more for so many people. And you don't have to be, specialized like you and I and have D1 aspirations. And, you can get in the sport and it make you a better person. You can start in high school, learn so much. And so we focused on high schoolers. We did a campaign focused on, rewarding high schoolers who submitted their stories of how they got into wrestling and what it meant to them. And then we did posters with celebrities who wrestled, Tom Cruise, they're just Judge Joe Caprio, Pratt from the Marvel Rivals. Chris Pratt. He was a big part of the campaign. Lots of football players. And we had them do kind of a post and put something out there or collaborate with US Wrestling Foundation on a post that talked about what the sport meant to them. So, our tie to Unstoppable is really through the US Wrestling Foundation and, Jack Clark, who's the executive director, Jordan Burroughs, Kerry McCoy, Adeline Gray, the people on their board. And those are people that were more on ground zero of the project. But, we brought strategy, consultation, marketing and those kind of things to it.
Okay. That's awesome, man. That's great. So I know we talked a little bit before this and we had some topics I wanted to touch on. So I wanted to kind of put this one together here is what do you think the current state of wrestling is looking like right now, especially the impact of NIL and then Penn State being so dominant in collegiate wrestling right now?
Yeah, well, this one's my favorite one to dive in on. And I hope my father-in-law sees this because he is a season ticket holder at Penn State and Lock Haven. But I'm so sick of just like how good Penn State is. I mean, aren't we all? I love it. I have so much respect for the program, but I want to see, these matches and these team titles. I want to see them be tightly contested. I love, that element of wrestling and it, and it's hats off to them that they've been able to pull so far away from the crowd. But right now it feels like Penn State, then your tier twos that are way below Penn State, which you have pretty much Iowa, Oklahoma State, Cornell, maybe like Ohio State, Nebraska could fit in there. We have a couple more programs, and then it's like the rest of the ranked programs and pretty much everybody else. And, it's like with David Taylor, I think we've seen kind of an unprecedented pivot into, what could win, right? You have Coleman Scott, who was an NCAA champion. He was an Olympian, Olympic medalist even with bronze, and had been there, had been John Smith's understudy, had already been a head coach at UNC and helped turn that program around. Then came back to Stillwater, was the associate head coach alongside John Smith, essentially being groomed for that role. And, they jumped at the chance of David Taylor, whose only coaching experience was M2 and his youth training academy. And it shows that it's almost a marketing thing. As a marketing guy, it shows that like sometimes it's not about right who's the most qualified even. It's like, yeah, David Taylor is great of a wrestler as there's ever been, but he wasn't more qualified than Coleman Scott, especially not from a coaching standpoint. And so it's like, but can he get the recruiting pipeline or, just the buy-in from donors or, just those kind of things that we've already seen. And I'd love to see Oklahoma State kind of step in, make a run for things, shake things up a little. But, like the last piece of this equation that comes to mind is with Iowa. They, have been so consistently at the top for so long and now pretty much consistently second aside from 2020. But they seem to be a full step behind Penn State, and you have people calling for, brands to be fired and then to bring in a new coach. And that is insane to me because, again, you look back at it, as far as national titles won, coaching, as far as individual accolades, when he wrestled and being an Olympian and being a multiple time world medalist, it's kind of unprecedented to be like, hey, we're going to get somebody better than Brands. I mean, it's like there's a very short list of people that you could even consider, an upgrade from him. And that list, none of them have a better coaching resume than him. So it's like, you could be like, oh, well, would Iowa blow up if we got Kyle Dake as our head coach? Maybe, but again, he's not, doesn't have the same coaching resume as Tom Brand. So, it's like, to me, I think wrestling fans, there's a lot of couch warriors. There's a lot of people that, prideful people that have their strong opinions and people calling for Brands' head. But it's like, show me someone that everybody's going to celebrate replacing Brands. I mean, there's only a few people that you could announce to replace Brands that, would even sound okay,
Right. Yeah. And kind of digging into that a little bit, I was actually getting recruited by North Carolina. They were in my top 5. So then when I saw Coleman Scott kind of go over there, I'm like, yeah, he's obviously going to take over the head coaching job. He's the head coach there. Next thing you know, Taylor comes in. That was surprising for me as well. But more importantly, going back to what you're saying about Iowa, is they just landed the number 1 recruit in the 2026 class, who's Bo Bassett. And obviously he's a big marketing scheme. He's going to be very successful there. I'm sure of it. But do you believe that they would actually move on, especially after the recruiting class and landing somebody like Bo Bassett?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if you have, I think the other thing is if you have somebody like that, who's such a big name and player and kind of like an unprecedented level of height and stardom coming into college, sometimes the tables turn and they're able to call the shots, and so you never know. I think if, I think it would probably have to come from the donors, just knowing how, backed that program is. I don't think you could ever make a move on Brands without having like full backing of the donors and, I don't want to say the fan base, but the donors. But it would be interesting to see. I can't say for sure.
Yeah. I'm kind of interested to see how that goes. I kind of looked at it from the perspective as they landed him. I'm sure they'll give him a chance with Bo and kind of see if they can rebuild around that program and make them compete with Penn State at this point.
Yeah, it's like it's the Chance Marsteller effect back at Lock Haven. It's like, who else is now going to want to go to Iowa because, Bo Bassett's going there or is going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, we just recently started 2025. What does your career look like from you from here on out? Can you see yourself continuing with the current company you're with long run? Would wrestling be something that you want to get back into coaching? I'm running a wrestling facility with a few other guys here in Michigan, and I still have to be involved with it. I just feel like I have to do that, with the drive and still being young. Is that something that you want to do? Do you want to continue with this company and then do that as well?
Sure. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, giving back too, it's like you have this, well of knowledge up there, and it's like, why not share it? It's a bunch of people who made you as good and as successful as you were. And so it's like, yeah, I definitely feel the calling to give back. And I'll start with the first part of the question, which is definitely, I love where I'm at. I mentioned, what we do, but then kind of just jumped over to what we're doing for US Wrestling Foundation. And that's something that's really, really cool to me is I work with other wrestlers. My CEO wrestled in college. Our vice president wrestled at George Mason. So, it's nice. I work with other wrestlers, obviously a lot of other people as well. But we get to take on some passion clients. So I mentioned, 95% of our portfolio are those federal contractors, but we get to work with USWF and, National Wrestling Hall of Fame and USA Wrestling and Wrestle Like a Girl. So, those things are really cool. And that we have those passion clients in the nonprofit side. Could definitely see me being there for a while as just promoted to director. one of those things that, we're a small company, and, I'd love to grow to a point where, maybe one day I'm part of that leadership team of the company. So, recently was brought up from manager to director, and, absolutely just love working for that organization. And then the second part, definitely want to get back into coaching. I looked at it when I got back. The only catch is, it's like anything. I don't really want to work with, wrestlers that aren't a certain level. And I want to work with guys that I can take to the next level. It doesn't do me any good to, show somebody the basics. It makes a lot more sense for me to take somebody who has goals, and really clean up their wrestling and get them to the next level. So I think from that aspect, I think about private coaching, so I can kind of pick who I'm working with and be selective, and stingy with my time. And I think when it comes to that, I'm a lot more open for like the volunteering, the compensation isn't as important. But then it's like, I've looked at different things from taking over programs to, just being full-time on staff at programs. And it's like, now your commitment is to many kids of many levels, and at that point it's like, I have to be well compensated. I have, like I said, I'm married just like you. Congrats again on that, buddy. And so how it is. It's like, you only have so much time after work and to begin with. So you want to spend that time with your wife, and you want to, spend that time with your dog, and you want to do the things that you don't get to do during the day. So it's like, for me, I know I get a lot of fulfillment from it, and I know I could help change a lot of lives, beyond wrestling. And I definitely plan on getting back. But we'll kind of see, where God takes me and what the route is back,
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I kind of had the same perspective on it initially. I was kind of looking at like, hey, I want to coach guys at a higher level that are going, they want to go Division I and all that. And now with our facility, we have a youth group that's, our youngest guy right now, I want to say is 7. And then we have our high school guys, and we have a lot of nationally ranked high school guys in our room right now too. So I kind of get the variety, and I think that's important too, to kind of just be able to touch on that. And that's why I love club coaching as opposed to going to high school or, college coaching that way. It's nice to be able to touch on all those things. And I really enjoy it. I work daytime job with Gabe Dean actually in my storage in his company. And so it's great, man. I love working with wrestlers, and then I go to wrestling practices at night. It's a great thing, man.
That's awesome. What's your club called? I have to get on the.
It's Michigan Premier.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. They probably already follow you guys. I've seen you guys.
Yeah. I actually started with Owen Scott, who wrestled at Cornell, and we were doing our own thing, and then we actually combined with another club in the area, and so now we combined, and now it's Michigan Premier Wrestling Club. So
that's awesome, man. I think back in the day, I remember. I think it was actually Colorado Ugly Year, but Michigan had some pretty competitive youth and middle school teams up at those duels. So maybe, you guys are the next big Michigan club on the block.
That's what we're hoping, man. We're hoping we can make that step. And, obviously we have some really, really good 8-9-year-olds, 10-year-olds that are some hammers right now. So I'm sure in the next upcoming years, you'll see those guys kind of hop on the high school scene and hopefully be elite at that level.
Yeah, as you know, man, the time will fly by. Before you know it, they will be. And I've already seen that a little bit in my own area where, we had no clubs in Northern Virginia. And like I said, I had to travel for all my coaching. And then, in around 2018, there was a club founded, Nova Wrestling Club, and they brought in a coach, Joe Kemmer, who is a national champ, 2-time national champ, actually at Kutztown. And, they've really been turning it around. And these young wrestlers that when they first were founded that I would watch when I was in the room helping out are now, older and they're very talented wrestlers. So it comes so fast.
It does. It really does, man. But, TK, I really appreciate you joining me here for season 3, episode 10 of Locked In Podcast. It was great hearing about your life through the sport of wrestling, man. It was awesome.
Thanks, Sage. I really appreciate you having me. It was great to catch up, and I know we'll stay in touch. So really grateful to be a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone watching. And don't forget to follow the podcast on IG at @official_locked in podcast there for any updates in the future. Thank you again, TK. And hope we can get together soon with the wives.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Sage.
Awesome, man. Yep. You have a good one.
You too.